Hello, everyone. I am at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Charlottesville, Virginia, and this morning I am talking with John Boody of Taylor & Boody Organbuilders, which is the company that built this fantastic organ here behind me. And I guess my first question, John, is why did you want to build this organ in the style of an instrument from 300 or 400 years ago? How did you become interested in old organs?
Before we started our business, George Taylor and I went to Europe several times, and we kept studying organs from the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries, and this form of instrument is really the classical organ form that goes, the oldest playable organ is in Sion, Switzerland, and it is in this form where the largest pipes are in the center, the 8-foot principal you see here in facade, and the tenors are to the outside, and then the trebles fill in between. And you see the organ is freestanding, and George Taylor always says, well, it's in the form of a person. It's the upper body is where the sound is coming from, and then there's the stalk of the organ, which is a little bit narrower and holds the case up. So there's a very real reason why the organ is put together this way. And in this, the classical layout of a pipe organ, all the pipes are contained within this rather close and resonant wooden cabinet. The cabinet has several functions. It first of all protects the pipes. The other thing it does is it puts the sound in a kind of resonant cavity where the sound of all the pipes can be mixed together really well, and so you're hearing kind of a blended sound. The inside pipes are a little bit more distant than the front pipes, so you have a good contrast between the inside pipes and the outside pipes. This organ is in 3 divisions. The grate is up above on the impost, and the Brust positive is here above the keyboards. And in the positive, you can see in the front row here, there's a reed stop, and it's kind of an oboe. We call it a regal because the resonators are short. They're not tuned length. They're mainly made to shape the sound, to provide kind of a vowel to the sounding pipe. And the third part of this organ is the pedal. And the pedal, the biggest pipes of the pedal are actually behind the organ. They're made out of wood, and they hang upside down under the walkboard. It doesn't hurt them at all to be upside down. The music still comes out perfectly well.
Can you explain how pipe organs built hundreds of years ago worked?
Well, the first organs that were built in the Gothic period, they were made with a great chorus of pipes. And you only could do one thing, and that was make a big sound. And they had many pipes that were tuned in overtones. So it was a dramatic and amazing thing for people to hear. And you have to think about people of that time. They didn't hear loud sounds. Life was kind of quiet. And there are accounts of people in Winchester Cathedral hearing the organ for the first time and running from the church with their hands over their ears because they couldn't understand this amazing harmonic sound that they heard from the organ. Then a little bit later on, they figured out how to turn off kind of the back organ, this great chorus, and they had a way that they only could play the front pipes. And the original stop action for the front pipes was a big lever here on the front of the organ, so they could turn it off. And the way they did that, turning the pipes off and on, is what we still build into the organ. where there are strips of wood under the rows of pipes, and the strip of wood is drilled with the same holes as the line of pipes. And when you move this slider, you make it so these holes don't line up anymore and the pipes don't get any wind. So then the next step in organ building design was to have all the rows of pipes with stops. And when they first did that, the stop knobs came out up here on the end of the organ. They hadn't thought about how to connect the slider to the place where the organist is sitting. So they had an extra person there who, I guess through hand signals or shouting or something, could turn the stops off and on. Now on the key action, the very earliest organs, and there are some pictures in the old books that show organs that start with the biggest pipe here in the base, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and the smallest pipe is on the treble. And that makes kind of sense because they could connect to the valves from the keyboard by leaning the key action. But it made for terrible crowding in the arrangement of the organ. You see what we've done here by spreading out the big pipes in the center and the tenors to the outside and the trebles fit in. It's a very efficient layout, so the pipes have more space and they fit better. Also, engineering-wise, you don't have all the weight on one side of the organ wanting to tip the organ over. So what they did is they devised a series of rollers that carried the motion of the key sideways in the organ, so the trackers could come up and move sideways. And if Jonathan will take off the music rack, we can look at an example of how this is made. So here's an example of the leaning trackers here. See, they're kind of leaning over, and we've done this in this division to get a little bit more space, but there are 6 or 7 rollers, and they're up in here. In this wind chest, it retains some of the old Gothic idea where most all this chest is chromatic. See, they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. In the great organ, we've done a system where it's completely spread out, and these pipes actually stand in major thirds, which is wonderful for the tuning of the organ, that you have those very pure tunings standing rather close together in the array. So that was the evolution of the playing action. The original organs only had one keyboard, and that keyboard was a very large. I don't think they figured out how to make the organ play easily, and the keys were very large, and you actually played them with your fist, like a carillon. So it took a lot of force and a lot of power to play this big organ. And after a while, organ builders learned how to make this really refined action, and then they learned how to make 2 keyboards. And then the last step was they figured out how to connect the 2 keyboards with a coupler. And in this organ, the coupling of the 2 keyboards is done by sliding the burst positive keyboard just in a little bit. The great playing action runs up through the burst positive keyboard, and it turns the corner with a little metal right angle square. And that square has a little ski jump on the front. When you push the burst positive key back, it's called a shove coupler. You push it back, and it's under that little ski jump. So when you play the lower keyboard, you get to play the upper keyboard at the same time. This organ makes a little bit of sound when you play, because in the early days we didn't think it was good to put any felt or leather or anything in the playing action. We wanted that really crisp touch to the playing action, and it's very much like old organs and harpsichords where you have a very intimate control. And in this organ it's especially good because if you look at the Brust positive, for example, the connections are direct and they go right up to the wind chest here, and you can see the pull wires where the action goes through the bottom of the wind chest, and inside the wind chest there's a wooden valve. But here, when you think about it, it's a marvelous thing because when you touch a key, you're touching this valve. And if you're touching this valve, you're touching the pipe. And a sensitive keyboardist like Jonathan is intimately connected with the sound of that pipe. And there's nothing like it. All these organs which are made in different systems, those systems intervene between the player and the pipe. But here, it's as pure as it can be. And we like that. And we still build organs now after 80 instruments. We still build the same thing, the same method.
Maybe we should talk more about these pipes. We've got quite an array here.
Let me talk about the metal first. This organ is unique in our instruments. First of all, this was the first organ where we made every single pipe. We were strongly influenced by the very earliest organs that we saw in Europe that were, early 17th century, 16th century instruments. And we were given a pipe that was from an organ built by Hendrik Niehoff about 1520 in Schoonhoven, Netherlands. We had one pipe, and we took a little snip of this pipe from an inconspicuous place, and we had it spectrographically analyzed, so we knew what the essential components were. So it was about 98% lead, had a tiny bit of tin, some bismuth, some antimony, some copper, some silver. And when we did further research about that, we were wondering why did the organ builder know to put all these little things into the metal? And what those alloying metals do is they make the lead, which is inherently a very soft material, it makes the lead strong enough that it will stand up over time as a pipe. And we wondered why the organ builders knew this, and then we did more research, and we saw some analysis of Harz Mountain lead, which would have been mined in Germany and certainly available to the organ builders in the Nederlands. And it turns out that the Harz Mountain lead is the same as the alloy is exactly the same as that Niehoff pipe. So what the organ builders did is they went down to the store, the local shop, and bought a chunk of lead and made pipes out of it, and they didn't do anything. So it turned out that the alloy was quite stable and quite good, and maybe it happened entirely by accident. The metal is wonderful. You can see me bending this piece. So this is a piece of lead that's hammered, and you can see it's totally pliable. And if you take this piece of metal and you round it around a mandrel and solder it together, so here's your pipe already, starting to look like a pipe. So I have several other pipes here. So I've talked about the front pipes, and they're the essential principal pipe of the organ, open at the top, and they look rather narrow in their proportion. And so this is the pipe that makes the diapason, or the principal sound. The other type of pipe, and I mentioned the regale, is the reed pipes. And the reed pipes have, they have several components here. There's a shallot that's a brass tube with an open top, and then there's a tongue, a very thin tongue made out of brass, and that tongue has kind of a ski jump curve, a gentle curve. And there's a wire here that can move up and down, and so you can tune the pipe by moving the wire up and down. So here's the tongue free. Here goes the tuning wire up here. So I'll do it again. So I can adjust the length of that reed. And then there's a boot here that goes and protects and holds the air in for the whole thing. Has to be fit very carefully, and there's the wind goes in at the bottom. This part is just a resonator, and in a trumpet stop like this resonator is tuned. So if this is a middle C, this resonator is about 2 feet long. This is essentially a stopped flute. It's a Spitz gedeckt, and we've made a number of these in the pedal as the 8-foot pedal flute stop, and it has this cone on top, and then it has a very tiny little cover on the top, so it is a completely covered stop. It's very pervasive sound, kind of hollow in its sound, but it's an excellent stop for the pedal especially, and we've made it a number of times.
This organ is Opus 3 and was built in 1980. How many instruments have you built since?
So we're way up now above 80 instruments total, some of them very large. And my son, Eric Boody, and my son-in-law, Aaron Reichert, are carrying on the business part of the thing. George Taylor and I are mostly retired. We only go out for speaking engagements. And we're very happy, and the workshop in Stanton now has 3 big organs to build, and it seems like even in the pandemic time, the pipe organ is maintaining its importance. Many places are recording, and there are people listening all over the world, so it's a great mission for the instrument to reach out to people, and it's working very well.
Well, this is a really beautiful instrument, and I thank you very much for coming and talking to us. It's been great fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.